Oh, thank you.
So I got trained and then I was like medical. That for 3 hours. The next one, five. Yeah, it was negatively graded.
Did it guess 6 questions?
Hopefully your last exam didn't go too badly. Whoever it was in micro last. Trade.
Some might have micro.
It shouldn't be so. Last week Cournot and Bertrand. So we looked at free entry under Bertrand and Cournot competition. Remember, free entry under Bertrand competition, you got only one firm entering and you got monopoly. Free entry under Cournot competition, you got too many firms entering, we showed. Okay? And we kind of interpreted Cournot competition as this choosing capacity first and then competing in price process. Okay? And how the competition ended up was a function of what happened when one firm ran out of capacity. Okay, so if the two firms chose different prices, everyone would go to the cheapest firm and then the most expensive firm would run out of quantity. So some consumers ended up getting rationed. And we said that with efficient rationing, you basically got Cournot competition in that process. But we also said it was a different type of rationing, but it was this proportional rationing thing where people arrive randomly at the shop. Okay, so it's not necessarily the high value consumers who end up buying the good. And with proportional rationing, we said we ended up a bit closer to perfect competition. So in the class, but not many of you came to, we went through the Cournot competition exercise I'd set. But as we've got a bit of time in this lecture, I just want to start by going through this other Krebs-Schenkman exercise I set last week. You know, hopefully to reinforce a little bit about how this works, and so you can see the differences between the proportional rationing and the efficient rationing. Okay, so the setup again was we had a linear demand curve, just quantity demanded at just 1 minus the price. There were two firms, both had zero marginal cost, and we supposed for its proportional rationing. So that meant that the residual demand facing firm 2, if they were the higher priced firm, was given by this expression. Okay, so with proportional rationing, it's random who gets to buy from which firm, who gets to buy from a cheaper firm. And so what's happening to demand is, you know, QP2 is the demand that firm 2 would place if they were the only firm. So what happens is they have the demand they place normally multiplied by some constant. Okay, the demand is just scaled down from what it would be otherwise. Okay, so this is the choice of firm 2. So that's the quantity chosen by firm 1 in the first period. That's the price. So what I asked you to prove was that selling in the second stage, setting a price equal to 1 minus the sum of the quantities the firms chose in the first stage, that was an equilibrium. Okay, so remember, first stage we choose capacity, second stage we choose prices. Okay, and we're looking at the second stage game, and the claim to prove was that this was an equilibrium of the second stage, as long as in the first stage, both people had chosen capacities less than a quarter. And the way we're going to prove this is exactly the same as how we proved the equivalent statement for efficient rationing last week. Okay, so we're going to be 2 steps. You want to prove that these firms don't want to deviate. Okay, so you're saying, look, let's imagine the other firm is playing this equilibrium. Can I do any better than playing this equilibrium myself? Okay, so let's suppose that firm 1 is setting this price. Does firm 2 want to deviate from setting that price? Okay, so there are 2 possible deviations. You can think about either they're going to increase their price or they're going to decrease their price. So, easy one first. Do they want to decrease their price? So let's, how much of the, if this is the price they're setting, what's the total quantity being demanded? So 2 firms are setting this price. So what's the quantity demanded of that price? Demand curve, lovely. Pardon?
1 minus.
Yeah, exactly. So 1 minus P star, which is just going to be, what's that going to be here? so if both firms are selling this price, then the quantity that's being demanded is precisely the capacity of the firms. Okay, so they're selling all of their stock and they're not left with anything. So what's going to happen if one of the firms cuts the price they're selling it? So if I come along and say, look, I'm going to sell a bit cheaper. So can they sell any more? Like, no. They're already selling their capacity. Okay, so if they cut their price, they don't sell any more units. All that happens is they make a bit less money on each unit they sell. Okay, so if they're selling at capacity, they never want to cut their price. Okay, so it's easy to rule out firms deviating to cutting their price. So we now just have to think about whether a firm would like to deviate to increasing its price. Okay, so if firm 2 comes along and increases its price, it's then going to be the higher priced firm, and it's going to face this residual demand curve. Okay, remember, everyone wants to buy from firm 1, so firm 1 is getting the first pick of the demand, if you like, and some proportion of the demand is left over for firm 2, the higher priced firm. So we have to check that if they increase their price from this price, their profits should go down. Okay? You know, if increasing your price reduces your profits, you certainly don't want to do it. Okay? So the first thing we've got to do is work out what their profits are. So what are profits going to be here for firm 2? You're all very sleepy in your test. So there's no cost, zero marginal cost. Okay, so profits are just going to be price times quantity. Okay, so P2 times the quantity that firm 2 is selling, which is just given by the residual demand curve. Okay, so the profits of firm 2 are going to be P2 times Q P2 times Q P1 minus Q1 bar over Q P1. Okay, and we can substitute in. We know what the Q function is. It's just 1 minus P. Okay, so that's P2 times 1 minus P2 times all of this thing over here. 1 minus P1 minus Q1 bar over 1 minus P1. Sorry, is that not clear? That's Q. Q1. Just that expression there. Okay. So we want to check that increasing profits, increasing prices, decreases profits. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to look at the derivative of firm 2's profits with respect to their price, and we want to check that derivative is negative. If that derivative is negative, it means that increasing price is reducing profits. Okay, and we're going to evaluate the derivative at this point. Okay, so what's this derivative? This is just a constant, right? P2 doesn't appear in this term. So that one's easy. This, you can multiply out the brackets if you like, so it's just P2 minus P2 squared. So what's the derivative of that going to be?
1 minus 2p2.
Yep. 1 minus 2p2 times all of this stuff we had before. 1 minus p1 minus q1 bar over 1 minus p1. Good. Okay, so we want to see if this is negative. And then we want to see if it's negative at this price, at this price we claimed was an optimum. So we're going to substitute in for this price into the expression. Okay, so when P2 and P1 are equal to the optimal price, then this expression is going to be 1 minus 2 times this thing. Okay, so 2 times 1 1 minus Q1 bar plus Q2 brackets times this expression there, which is 1 minus P1, so again it's this thing, 1 minus brackets minus Q1 bar brackets, and I've got 1 minus P1, which is 1 minus. Yeah, I've written that with all the brackets in, so you see exactly what I'm doing. All we've done is just substituted this expression in for P1 and P2. Okay, but you can simplify this a lot, right? You've got lots of 1s and they're all going to cancel out. So this is, like, we don't even need to worry about this term over here, this messy thing. What we've got here is kind of collecting all the terms together. We've got 1 minus 2, so that's minus 1. Here we've got minus minus, that makes a plus. Okay, so we've got 2 Q1 bar plus Q2 bar. Q1 plus Q2. Minus for 1 we have here. Minus 1. All times this expression here. Okay, and here we've got 1 minus 1, that's going to cancel out. And we've got minus minus, that's going to make a plus. Okay, so we're going to get Q1 bar plus Q2 bar minus Q1 bar. So that's just going to be Q2 bar. And here on the bottom we've got 1 minus 1 minus. That's good. Those two are going to cancel. We're just going to have Q1 bar plus Q2 bar. Okay, so this is just going to be Q2 bar over Q1 bar plus Q2 bar. Let me draw a line so you can see what that is. I'll write it on the other board just so you're clear exactly what we've got. Okay, so it's 2 times Q1 bar plus Q2 bar minus 1 all times Q2 bar over Q1 bar. Okay, that was the expression we had. Okay, so this is the derivative of profit with respect to firm 2's price evaluated at this price. We're trying to find out if that's an equilibrium. So we've got 2 terms here, this times that. Is this term positive or negative?
Positive.
Yeah. You know, capacity has to be positive. This is positive divided by positive. So the second bit's positive. So all we need to do is to see whether this term is positive or negative. Okay, so we were told that Q1 bar was less than a quarter and Q2 bar was less than a quarter. Okay, so 2 times Q1 bar plus Q2 bar, what's the most that can be?
Less than 1.
Less than 1, exactly. So this thing, 2 times Q1 bar plus Q2 bar is less than 1. Okay, this bit. So it minus 1 must be negative. So this whole thing must be negative. Okay, so given this assumption, if you increase price, profits go down. Okay, so the original price we said was an equilibrium. Okay, but this only holds when we have the Q1 bar is less than a quarter and Q2 bar is less than a quarter. And if you remember last week we looked at the case with efficient rationing, and there the constraint wasn't being less than a quarter, it was being less than a third. Okay, so with this proportional rationing, it's kind of become harder to get this Cournot outcome in the second stage. Firms have to produce less in the first period in order to get a Cournot-like outcome in the second period. And in fact, what happens when you solve this game, if you solve for the capacities that firms would like to produce in the first period, firms would like to produce at least a quarter capacity in this game. Okay, so what's going to happen if you solve a full game is that firms would produce more than this quantity, and so you wouldn't get the Cournot outcome in the second period. Okay, and the intuition is just that these thresholds we need are lower. Okay, so it's kind of harder to get this equilibrium appearing in the second period. So this is just a restatement of the same thing. So what's happening is firms are running out of stock, and whereas with efficient rationing, it's the consumers who value the good most who are getting the good, now it's kind of a random mix of consumers who end up getting the good. Okay? So if you're the higher price firm, it's no longer the case that only the lowest value consumers are going to you. Now you've got a mix of both high value consumers and low value consumers. Okay, so if you've got this mix of both high and low value consumers, then you kind of, the cost to you of being the high price firm is lower. You know, you're not going to hurt so much because you've still got some high value consumers coming to you. And if you've still got some high value consumers coming to you, you don't have to set such a low price. You know, you can still sell goods at a higher price. Okay, so firms mind less about being the higher priced firm when you have this proportional rationing. Okay, because they mind less about being the high priced firm, they're in the first period they have a higher incentive to invest in capacity. Okay, because they think, you know, under efficient rationing, they're worried that if they invest too much in capacity, they're going to end up being the high-priced firm anyway. And then they've made all this investment in capacity, now they're going to make a big loss. Okay, because they're the high-priced firm, no one's going to them. Whereas with this setting, they're prepared to invest a bit more in capacity in the first period, because they know that if something goes wrong and somehow they end up a high-priced firm in the second period, they're still going to be able to make some profits in that second period. So this kind of encourages firms to invest more in the first period. And thus, as a result, you get quantity above the Cournot level. Okay? So with proportional rationing, you get closer to perfect competition. So profits are lower than with Cournot competition. What we're going to go on to talk about this week, though, is collusion. You know, these firms are kind of competing quite intensely, but what if they could collude in some way? Okay, maybe that way they could get their profits back up again. Okay, so what we're going to find is that, as you'd expect, collusion is going to result in higher profits than under Cournot competition. And in fact, even the monopoly level of profits is going to be sustainable when you've got collusion. So outline for today, well, I'm going to introduce what collusion is and talk a bit about why firms might collude and some examples from the real world. And we're going to talk about how you go about sustaining collusion in dynamic oligopoly. Okay, and we're going to talk about the conditions you need for collusion to be easy versus hard. I don't know, have you done infinitely repeated games in your game theory yet? So we're going to be looking at infinitely repeated games. Okay, so why do firms want to collude? Well, you know that under Cournot or Burton competition, the total industry profits is certainly going to be lower than the profits under monopoly. Okay, so firms would like to collude somehow in order to increase their overall profits. Okay, so under Cournot competition, they're producing more than they would under monopoly, so profits per unit sold end up being lower. And you can think about this via a kind of revealed preference argument. I don't know if you've heard the term revealed preference. Yeah? So what happens is, well, if a monopolist wanted to, they could set the Bertrand price or the Cournot quantity. You know, a monopolist is free to do what they like. So if a monopolist wanted to produce the Cournot quantity, they could. If they choose not to produce that quantity, it means that the quantity they produce must give them higher profits than the Bertrand or Cournot. Okay, so kind of doesn't matter what the setup is, doesn't matter what the demand curve is, doesn't matter what the cost function is, the monopoly level of profits must always be at least as high as the Bertrand or Cournot one. Because if a monopolist wanted to, they could just replicate the Bertrand or Cournot pricing policy. Okay. So what we might see under oligopoly is that firms somehow get to an agreement amongst themselves that they're not going to set the Bertrand price or the Cournot quantity, they're going to set the monopoly price and quantity. They're going to set the monopoly price and they're going to split the monopoly quantity equally between all of them. Okay? So if they did this, they'd all make higher profits. Okay? So it would certainly be better for them all individually. And what's driving this is this kind of business stealing effect we were talking about last week. So when we were talking about Cournot competition and there being too much entry relative to the social optimum, as our friend over there pointed out, it's important that you think about the effect on quantity of another firm producing a bit more. Here, we're only really worried about what's happening to industry profits, okay, so we're just going to think about the effect on profits. So a firm that increases its quantity is going to reduce the profits of all the other firms, okay, it's going to force them to reduce their quantities as well, if you like. So there's an externality there, so there's going to be too much entry relative to the profit maximising outcome. Okay, on the Cournot competition, it also turns out that there's too much entry relative to the total welfare maximising outcome. That's something different. Okay, so there's always going to be too much entry relative to profit maximisation. And you can think of it as a bit like a prisoner's dilemma. Okay, there's a Pareto dominant outcome for the firms, you know, just looking at the utility of the firms, not the consumers, where they all set the monopoly price. But if everyone's setting the monopoly price, one of those firms would like to come along and set a penny below the monopoly price and take the whole market. Okay, so, you know, just like prisoner's dilemma, you can collude or defect. And if everyone cooperates, then you get this good outcome. Here, if everyone sets the monopoly price, you get a good outcome for profits. But people always have this incentive to undercut, and that means they will end up not doing very well. So let me show you some examples of collusion in the real world. So, you know, I know this is mostly theory, but there's some reality behind all of this stuff. So, OPEC cartel is very famous. So they're the cartel of oil-producing nations who control the oil price, effectively. And it seems that what the cartel does is they just maximise their joint profits. Okay, so they choose the quantity of oil to supply to the market, but would make them all best off overall. Okay, so they're exactly just they're acting as if they were just one big company that was a monopolist, okay, maximising monopoly profits. And any firm that deviates from doing this, you know, any country I should say, tends to get punished pretty harshly by the cartel. Obviously, collusion is illegal in most developed countries. You know, the countries in the OPEC cartel have a pretty strong incentive not to join these international agreements, but make it illegal. So the OPEC cartel is very public. Everyone knows it exists. Everyone knows it's a cartel. Everyone knows they're talking to each other. But there are many secret agreements as well. So Sotheby's and Christie's, you must have heard of, most famous auction houses in the world. And in the 90s, the CEOs of the two companies were meeting in secret, and they agreed on the charges, the commission charges they were setting. Okay, so you think two auction houses, they're competing in price, the level of these commission charges. Birching competition where commission charges ought to be driven down to their marginal cost, basically. Instead, these guys were meeting and they were saying, look, I'm going to set 5% commission if you're prepared to set 5% commission as well. And they were keeping to this. They also shared client list and removed any possibilities of negotiating rates. So just to make sure that no one was breaking this agreement in any way. But eventually they were caught. You know, it was pretty difficult to catch them because everything was agreed in secret. It's hard to prove that these things are going on. And what happened was Christie's actually submitted information to the US government, and you know, so it's just like a prisoner's dilemma, really. Well, what happened is they told on the other person, And as a result, they got quite a small fine of $65 million. Oh no, the other lot got $65 million. Whereas Christie's didn't do too badly at all. Really. I think they just got slapped on the wrist. And so the CEO in person of some of these got a $7.5 million fine and a year in jail as well. So there's some justice in the world. And they had to pay $500 million in compensation. So, you know, the fact that they had to pay $500 million in compensation shows you just how profitable this collusive agreement was. You know, that colluding can really make an incredible difference to a firm's profits. And there's been some other famous secret collusive agreements that have eventually been found out. So in the 90s, I didn't know about this one, but in the 90s there was a vitamin cartel. So there were two big producers of vitamins, Hoffman La Roche. Oh, we're separate. Hoffman La Roche. La Roche, they make pharmaceutical products as well, I think. You know, if you go to, I think they're big in continental Europe. They used to make tapes when I was a kid. I don't know what else they make. Aventis, I've never heard of. Solvay, okay, so there are a few companies, they're all regularly exchanging sales data and price data so they could check that the others were following the collusive agreement. And again, they were eventually, price fixing obviously, again they were eventually prosecuted and got $500 million fine for this guy, Hoffman La Roche, and caught $250 million for that. And the EU also fined them, so the US fined them, then the EU fined them. And again, some people got Britain fined. So if you're going to have a collusive agreement, don't get caught, is the lesson here. So these are secret agreements, but they're explicit agreements. You know, these people are talking to each other. Okay, and if you're talking to your rival in this way, it's clear that you're doing something illegal. Okay, and if someone ever finds out that you've done that, you will end up in jail for a long time. But maybe it's possible to have collusion even when the two sides aren't talking to each other. Okay, and this can work through tacit agreements, and this is what we're mostly going to look at. You know, these secret agreements where people are talking to each other, there's not much interesting to model there, right? You know, they're two people who know each other who are just coming to some deal between them. The more interesting thing is the tacit agreement, where firms are somehow managing to agree not to set prices marginal cost, even without anything that's obviously breaking the law, like talking to your rival in this way. So this is what we're mostly going to focus on, and a simple example of this is that if you look at the price of TVs, Sony TVs here, all shops are charging the same price, and it's well above marginal cost. Okay, you know, if you're a high street shop selling Sony TVs, you've got a fairly strong incentive to undercut your rivals. You know, you can probably buy I don't know how much TVs cost these days. You can probably buy a 40-inch TV for 300 quid, but you're going to sell it for 500 quid or 400 quid or something. So, you know, maybe you'd like to undercut by £5 and steal the whole market for Sony TVs. But firms don't. Okay, and what's happening is there's some dynamic game happening between all the sellers of Sony TVs. Okay, so we're going to look at how that dynamic game might play out. So I've kind of hinted already, but we're going to be looking at infinitely repeated games. Before we get to infinitely repeated games, let's think a bit about finitely repeated games. So just imagine that there's virtual competition and there are several sales periods. Okay, so I'm going to sell TVs in 2000, 2001, 2002, up to 2010 maybe, and maybe I know that I'm going out of business in 2010. Okay, so I just exist for a finite number of periods. My rival also exists for a finite number of periods. So maybe, I don't know, if for any people in East Germany before the fall of the Berlin Wall, maybe there was a black market in videos from the West. Okay, they know that once the Berlin Wall falls down, this black market's going to shut down. So they know there's a finite number of periods that this market for Western videos is going to last. Okay, in that setting, can you sustain price above marginal cost? Okay, but the way to analyse this finitely repeated setting is to do exactly what we did with that centipede game. Okay, remember the game where I lost lots of money? The money was passing across the table, and the way you thought about it was you started at the last period, you thought about what people were doing in that last period, and then you go back a period. Okay? So in the last period, doesn't matter what's happened up to that point. In the last period, you've got nothing to gain by cooperating. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's the prisoner's dilemma, Bertrand competition, Cournot competition. In the last period of this finitely repeated game, you want to just do what you do if you're only playing the game one time. Okay, so in the prisoner's dilemma, and repeat the prisoner's dilemma in the last period, you're just going to screw the other person. Okay, in a repeated Bertrand competition, in the last period, you're going to set price of marginal cost. But the period before that, well, you know that the next period, the other guy is going to screw you no matter what you do. There's no point. So there's no point you being nice today, because next period you're going to get screwed like this. Okay, so as you roll this backwards, eventually you get to the first period, and it's going to be optimal in the first period to do the unfriendly thing, as well to not cooperate in the game you're playing. Okay, so it doesn't matter what game you're playing, if it has a unique Nash equilibrium and you're repeating the game finitely many times, the unique subgame perfect Nash equilibrium of the whole game is just going to be play the Nash equilibrium every period. Okay, so if you're repeating the prisoner's dilemma 100 times, the unique subgame perfect Nash equilibrium will be defect, exactly 100 times. So it's not enough to repeat the game finitely many times in order to get price above marginal cost or something else. So what we're going to need is an infinitely repeated game. But you think firms have a very long outlook. You know, most firms, they realise there's some probability of them going bust at some point in the future, but they want to exist for as long as possible. They're going to act as if they're going to exist forever. Okay? So the setup we're going to have, we're going to start with repeated Bertrand competition. Okay, we're going to be infinitely many periods indexed by t from 0, 1, 2, 3 up to infinity. We're going to be n firms, and we're all going to have constant marginal cost of c. Keep things easy. There's a market demand curve, Q of p. And we're going to suppose that if it was a monopolist, that monopolist would make profits of pi m every period. Okay, so pi m is just shorthand for the monopoly level of profits. And that corresponds to setting the price that we're going to call PM for monopoly price. Okay, so you know you could solve for PM and pi m just by maximising the monopolist profit, so quantity times price minus marginal cost. And that will give you a first order condition, but we don't really need to do that. Okay. So each of these firms, firm I from 1 up to n, okay, they're going to simultaneously set their price, PIT, so this is the price set by firm I in period t, and they're setting their price in period t, and they're setting it to maximise their discounted sum of future profits. Okay, so this is the standard type of expression you've seen before. It's going to be a sum from 0 up to infinity of your profits in period S, in period t plus S, I should say, so profits for firm I in period t plus S, discounted by some factor beta. Okay, so beta is going to be less than 1. The further out you are into the future, the more you're discounting the profits. Okay, you've seen expressions like this in macro, surely. They're all over economics, right? So this is a discounted sum of products. And you can think of this as just, you don't like this summation notation, we can just write out the sum. So it's for profits you get in period T, plus beta times the profits you're going to get in period T plus 1, plus beta squared times the profits you're going to get in period T plus 2, okay, etc., etc. And with beta less than 1, these beta to the power of something is going down and down and down, so you care less about the distant future. Yeah. Yeah, so if you had beta equal to 1, that's kind of an incredibly patient firm. But most people, they want to consume something, they'd rather consume something today rather than tomorrow. And people are impatient about consumption. So there's a kind of uninteresting equilibrium to this game, and that's firms setting price as marginal cost, all firms setting price as marginal cost in every period. Okay, so this is just a repeated equilibrium of the single period game, and it's not very interesting. No one's making any profits. Okay, there's no collusion going on there, so we're not interested in the trivial equilibrium. What we're more interested in is the one in which profit is maximised. Okay, so the one in which firms are choosing to set the monopoly price. So we're going to describe what this equilibrium will look like, and then we're going to prove that that is indeed an equilibrium. So in the first period, we're going to say that all firms will set the monopoly price. In each subsequent period, firms are going to set the monopoly price as long as they've never seen a firm setting any price other than the monopoly price. As soon as a firm sees another firm setting a price different to the monopoly price, from then on they're going to price at marginal cost. Okay, so if you have 5 periods, and for the first 4 periods everyone was setting the monopoly price, and then in the 5th period one of the firms deviates and prices just below the monopoly price, in period 6 onwards everyone's going to set the price at marginal cost. Okay, so this is our candidate equilibrium, and we have to show that this is indeed a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium again. And we call these types of equilibrium grim trigger strategies. Because what it is if someone's naughty, someone deviates, you kind of screw yourself over in order to screw them over for better. Okay, so it's like you're kind of, if someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do, you're detonating a nuclear bomb and everyone's suffering. Okay, but you hope that the knowledge that you're going to detonate a nuclear bomb if they do something you don't want them to do is going to persuade them not to do that thing in the first place. And the way we're going to prove this is an equilibrium is using something called the one-stage deviation principle. And I'm not going to prove this principle. Maybe in your game theory, if you're doing game theory, you might see a proof of this, I don't know. What this one-stage deviation principle says is that a strategy is a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium if and only if there's no possible history up to a point T. Okay, so there's no here's a game tree. There's no point in the game tree, that's what it's saying. There's no possible point in the game tree such that at that point in the game tree a player would like to deviate from their strategy in that period only. Okay? So what this means is that we don't have to consider complex deviations where people are considering changing their strategy at multiple points in the game tree simultaneously. To show something's a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium, all you have to do is consider deviations at a single node in the game tree, holding fixed their strategy everywhere else in the game tree. So this is going to make our life a lot easier. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use that one-stage deviation principle to show that the equilibrium the candidate equilibrium we described is indeed an equilibrium. Okay, so suppose we're at some point in time t, the game has carried on up to that point, we've got to show that no firm wants to deviate from that point. Okay? So there are two possibilities. Either, at some point in the past, someone has set a price up from a monopoly price, or up to that point T, everyone has set the monopoly price. Okay? If at some point in the past, someone has set a price up from the monopoly price, then you know that today, everyone else is going to be setting price as marginal cost. Okay, so if you know that everyone else is setting price as marginal cost, your best response is to set price as marginal cost as well. Okay, so if someone has ever deviated in the past and set a price up from the monopoly price, then your optimal thing to do is indeed to set price as marginal cost, given the equilibrium that everyone else. Okay, so no one wants to deviate once someone has set a price other than the monopoly price. So now we have to see if we've got to a point in the game tree where for the last T periods everyone has set the monopoly price, does anyone want to set a price other than the monopoly price in the next period? Okay, and we're going to use this one-stage deviation principle again. So there are two things to compare. You know, if you set a price a penny below the monopoly price, then today you're going to get the monopoly profits, right? Everyone's going to buy from you, no one's going to buy from anyone else. Okay, the penny off the price isn't really doing anything to your profits. You're going to get the monopoly profits, basically. But then in future periods, because you made this deviation, price is going to be marginal cost, you're not going to get any profits in future. Okay, so what we've got to compare is for profits are getting all of the monopoly profits today versus profits you get from following a strategy from now until the end of time. Okay, which is for monopoly profits divided by the number of firms. Okay, profits are distributed equally. So if you don't deviate, if you stick to the strategy, always set the monopoly price, then today you're going to get the monopoly profits divided by the number of firms. You're going to get your share of the monopoly profits. Next period you're going to get, again, the monopoly profits divided by the number of firms. Okay, but you care less about next period by this factor beta. Okay, period after you're still getting the same thing, but you care even less about it by beta squared. Okay, so your discounted profit stream from not deviating is pi m over n times 1 plus beta squared plus etc. Okay? And you've seen sums like this before, I guess. The trick for dealing with sums like this is if you multiply them by 1 minus beta, okay, then you can see what happens. So this is equal to pi m over n times 1 over 1 minus beta times 1 minus beta times what we had before, 1 plus beta plus beta squared. Okay, all we've done is put 1 minus beta over 1 minus beta, so that's equal to 1. And then we're just going to multiply up these brackets. So we've got 1 times 1, that's 1. And then we've got 1 times beta, that's beta. But then we're going to get a minus beta times 1, which is minus beta. So the plus beta and the minus beta cancel. And then we've got a 1 times beta squared. But then we've got a minus beta times plus beta, which is also minus beta squared. So a plus beta squared and a minus beta squared are going to cancel, etc., etc. And you can go on like that forever. And this sum is just going to be equal to, the product of these two things is just going to be equal to 1. Okay, so this is pi m over n times 1 over 1 minus 3. Which is what we've got on the book. Okay, so if you don't deviate, if you set the monopoly price from now on, you're going to get this profits of pi m divided by n times 1 minus beta. If you deviate today, then today you're going to get all the monopoly profits. Okay, you set a price 1p below the monopoly price, everyone buys from you, you get the monopoly profits. So, to show that our claim strategy is actually a sub-imperfect Nash equilibrium, we've just got to ensure that these profits are higher than these profits. Okay, that's what we need. We need this to be bigger than this. Okay, so we need this thing to be bigger than this thing, okay, so we need pi m over n times 1 minus beta to be bigger than pi m, okay, well, dividing both sides by pi m, this thing is just true if and only if 1 over n times 1 minus beta is bigger than 1, okay, this thing is true if and only if 1 is bigger than n times 1 minus beta, okay, and then if we divide both sides by n, this is true if and only if 1 over n is bigger than 1 minus beta. So, again, this is true if and only if beta is bigger than 1 minus 1 over n. Just added beta to both sides, subtracted 1 over n. Okay, so we need beta to be bigger than 1 minus 1 over n. Okay, and this is just equal to n minus 1 over n. Actually, sorry, we're happy if firms are indifferent between deviating and not deviating. You know, it's going to be an equilibrium still if they're indifferent. So these can be greater or equal to. Okay, so for an equilibrium to exist, of the type we described, all we need is that beta is bigger or equal to n minus 1 over n. So the discount factor has to be sufficiently high, which means firms have to be sufficiently patient. Okay, so as long as firms are patient, they can sustain this type of repeated equilibria where you get the monopoly profits coming out. And let's stop there for a break. The box.
I'm losing.
It's got to be around If we get going, we can probably finish a bit early, but we're on so many slides. Okay, so we had a discounted sum of profits, and the discount factor was this mysterious beta. So in macro, you will have seen something similar with a mysterious beta. But when we're thinking about firms, we should think a little bit more about where this beta is coming from. Okay, so you think about a firm, it's traded on the stock market. People are deciding whether or not to invest in the firm. Okay, people should be prepared to invest in the firm if it's getting the same return, if you like, as investing in a bond. Okay, so if the firm is going to get the same return as investing in a bond, the firm should be discounting the future by the interest rate. Okay, we showed this a bit more formally in micro last year. But, so what this means is that if a firm has rational owners, the firm is traded on the stock market, beta should be equal to 1 over 1 plus the interest rate. Okay, so the discount factor should be related to the interest rate. The higher the interest rate is, the more money you can get just by putting your money in a bond, in a government bond, so the more you discount the future. Okay, and the period of this bond, could be months or years, or it depends how often the market takes place. Okay, if you only sell the good, I don't know, like Santa costumes. You only sell Santa costumes once a year, so maybe the interest rate you care about for Santa costumes is the annual interest rate. I don't know, Kleenexes, you probably sell Kleenexes all year round, okay, so maybe you care about the daily interest rate. And, this thing that beta should be equal to 1 over 1 plus R, you can think of it as it comes from arbitrage between shares and bonds. Okay, but there's no point getting into the details of that. So our condition before was that beta had to be bigger than n minus 1 over n. Okay, so if we're thinking about a real interest rate, that means 1 over 1 plus r has to be bigger than n minus 1 over n. Okay, so we need the interest rate to be sufficiently low to get collusion. So now we're going to extend the model a little bit. Okay. The first extension we're going to make is we're going to suppose that demand is growing over time. So the demand at a price P in period T, so Q sub T of P, we're going to say that that's equal to 1 plus G to the power of T times Q without a subscript. Okay, so this is like the demand in period 0, and this is just growing over time. Okay, if G is 2%, then this thing is growing at 2% a year. Okay, so this is, in the real world, demand is growing over time because population is increasing, because productivity is improving. Okay, so we're going to have demand that's growing over time. And what would the monopolist do? Well, the monopolist maximizes quantity times price minus marginal cost. Okay, so here's the total quantity they're selling times price minus cost. And all we've done is we've multiplied what they normally maximize by something that isn't a function of P. So we've kind of scaled what they're maximizing by some constant. So it's not going to change the location of the maximum. Here's a graph. Okay. So maybe in period 1 their profits look like that. In period 2 their profits are just multiplied by an extra factor. So now the profits look like that. Okay. Profits have grown, but the location of the maximum won't change. Okay. So the fact that demand is growing over time isn't going to make any difference to the optimal price for the monopolist. The monopolist is still going to set its price PM. Okay. But their profits will be growing over time now. So the monopolist profits in period T will be this growth factor 1 plus G to the power of T, kind of the normal monopoly profits. Okay, so that's one modification to the model we're making. The second modification we're going to make is we're going to suppose for each period there's some probability that a firm is hit by what we call a death shock, and the death shock forces the firm to go out of the market. So maybe the owner of the firm actually dies, or maybe something, maybe there's an earthquake, some physical destruction, maybe these firms are in different locations, and different locations have different access to finance. Maybe finance gets cut down for some of these firms. So it's anything really. Any shock that could come along and kill one of these firms. And we're going to assume that once a firm is killed, another firm pops into existence to replace it. Just to make our life a bit easier. Okay, so there's some fixed probability of being hit with one of these death shocks in each period. And this probability is h. Okay, so in each period there's a probability h that the firm will be killed. And yeah, we're going to suppose the discount factor is 1 over 1 plus r, as it should be with rational terms. Okay, so then what are the expected profits from following this strategy? Well, in the first period, you get monopoly profits divided by n. You get your share of monopoly profits. The next period, you discount by 1 over 1 plus r. Okay, so you're discounting a bit. But the next period, profits have grown by a factor 1 plus g. But there's a probability of h that you're going to die. Okay, if there's a probability of h that you're going to die next period, then there's a probability of 1 minus h that you're still around next period. You only care about your profits in the case when you're not dead. Okay, so you're going to multiply by 1 minus h. So now you have all of this stuff in front of pi m over n. The next period, well, okay, you're discounting by 1 plus r squared now. The economy has grown 2 periods, so it's 1 plus g to the 2. There are 2 periods in which you could have died, so it's 1 minus 8 to 2, and so on and so on. Okay, so your profits in this extended model are just going to be like your profits in the original model, but with beta equal to this thing. So 1 over 1 plus r times the growth factor times this kind of death factor. So we know what the solution is going to be. Okay, to have the collusive equilibrium here, this thing has to be bigger than n minus 1 over n. Okay. So for a collusive equilibrium, by our previous results, all we need is this thing is bigger than n minus 1 over n. So when is it more likely that we get collusion? Well, we're more likely to get collusion if this side is big and this side is small. Okay, things that make this side bigger are going to make collusion easier. Things that make this side smaller are going to make collusion easier. Okay, so collusion is going to be more likely when the interest rate is low. Okay, it's going to be more likely when the economy is growing quickly. This is plausible. You know, if you look at developing countries, very fast growth, but they also tend to have a lot of inefficiency, a lot of close to monopoly behaviour. This is because collusion is easy to sustain in these circumstances. And collusion is going to be easier when this 1 minus h is big, so when h is small. Okay, so if there aren't many shocks hitting firms that are going to force them to exit, then collusion is going to be easier. Okay, and collusion is also going to be easier if the number of firms is small. No, it's big, sorry. Remember that n minus 1 over n is just equal to 1 minus 1 over n. Yeah, sorry, I meant small, didn't I? So when n is big, if n is big, this thing is small, so this whole thing is big. Okay? N big, this is small, this is big. So when n is big, this thing is big, which makes it harder for this to be satisfied. Okay, so collusion is easier with fewer firms than with many, which is intuitive, right? If n is 1, it's really easy to get collusion. You don't have to do anything to get collusion. And that's just what I say. But maybe it's a little bit implausible that demand is growing over time, but the number of firms is staying fixed. You might think that if demand is growing over time, that the number of firms should be increasing over time as well. So let's have a guess that the number of firms in period T would be equal to n times this growth factor. Then what are the profits from setting the monopoly price, from following this strategy? Well, it's just as before, but now today you get plan over n, your share of monopoly profits. Next period, you're discounting by 1 over 1 plus r. Demand has grown a bit, some probability you could have died, but you're dividing monopoly profits by more firms now. So originally we had play m over n. You were sharing monopoly profits between n firms. Now you're sharing monopoly profits between n times 1 plus g firms, because the number of firms is also growing. Okay, next period, the number of firms has grown twice. Okay, and what you see is that the 1 plus g's here are all going to cancel out. Okay, so going back, kind of plugging this into the original model, you can have a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium just if, where are we? Just if this thing is bigger than n minus 1 over n. Okay. So when with free entry, growing demand isn't having any effect on how easy it is to sustain collusion. Okay, because the growth in the number of firms is kind of cancelling out the growth in demand. And you can check that the number of firms will indeed grow like this with growing demand just by observing that monopoly profits don't grow over time. So if the number of firms is growing with this factor 1 plus g, and the whole economy is growing at the same rate, then each firm still has the same share of overall profits. Okay, so profits don't change over time. Let me say that again. So the economy is growing at g% a year. The number of firms is growing at g% a year. So profits, whole economy profits are growing at g% a year as well. But these are being shared between more and more firms. Okay, so the profits made by each firm isn't changing over time. Okay, and this is just from the fact that these 1 plus g terms are all cancelling out. Okay, so each firm is always making the same level of profits. So if there's some constant fixed cost of entering this industry, then you'd expect the same number of firms through time. Okay, so we've seen two equilibria of this game. We've seen the one in which people set price and marginal cost forever, and we've seen the one in which they set the monopoly price forever. And we might be interested to see if there are any other equilibria to this game. And it turns out that there are lots and lots of equilibria to this game, and this was proven by Freudenberg and Maskin in 1986. Freudenberg is very famous game theorist. Maskin proved a lot of important results in mechanism design. So both very big names. Okay, so what they show, they prove something they call the Folk theorem. And they say, well, consider any infinitely repeated n-player game. Okay, so any game at all. And we're going to assume that the payoffs are given by this discounted sum of the payoffs in each of the period games. And let's suppose for player I, pi I star, is the lowest payoff that players other than I can force on player I. So it's kind of, everyone gangs up on player I and chooses an action to make player I as bad off as possible. Player I does their best to kind of defend themselves against everyone trying to hurt them, but still they're going to be quite poorly off. And this pi I star is exactly how poorly off they are. You know, that's their payoff if everyone else is ganging up on them to hurt them. Okay. We're going to imagine that all players have instructions that tell them to do exactly what to do in each period. And given these instructions, we're going to suppose that players make an average payoff of VI, okay, where VI is some payoff that's higher than this lowest payoff that other people can force on you. So any payoff higher than this lowest possible one. Then, providing some minor technical condition is satisfied, if players are sufficiently patient, okay, so beta is sufficiently close to 1, then there's a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium in which player I attains an average payoff of this VI. Okay? So VI with any payoff level above this lowest possible one. So really, almost anything can be an equilibrium. You know, so think about let's think about the infinitely repeated prisoner's dilemma. Okay, let's see if we can apply this theorem to the prisoner's dilemma. So the payoffs in the prisoner's dilemma were, they look like this: CD, CD. This was, I'm going to get this right. 0, 3, 0, 3, 2, 2, 1, 4. Okay, there's the prisoner's dilemma. We can kind of plot these payoffs on a graph. So this is player 1's payoff, this is player 2's payoff. Let me draw, that's 0, 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got DD, which gives a payoff of 1, 1. We've got CD, which gives 0 and 3. We've got DC, which gives 3 and 0. And we've got CC, which gives 2 and 3. Okay, so what this says is, so we've given everyone some instructions. Okay, these instructions lead them to get an average payoff of VI. So, you know, think about the kind of things these instructions might be. It might be play C 1 period, then D for 5 periods, then C for 1 period, and then D for 5 periods. Okay? If the other player was playing the same thing, that would kind of get 1/6 of the payoff of CC and 5/6 of the payoff of DD. Or you can imagine more complicated things. So we can kind of jump around these 4 points with these instructions. So, what this condition is saying is that as long as this average level of payoff is above pi I star, there's an equilibrium that will give you that average level of payoff. What's pi I star going to be in the repeated prisoner's dilemma? So it's it's what, if everyone else gangs up on you, it's what you end up getting. Okay, you do your best to defend against them, but they're ganging up on you to make your life as horrible as possible. So what's the worst outcome you can get in this game?
1-1 is for defending yourself.
Yeah, 1-1. You defend yourself, so you get with this 1-1. Okay, so the condition says that everyone has to make a payoff bigger than the payoff they get in 1-1. Okay, so people try and screw you by playing D. You do your best to defend yourself against it by playing D yourself. Okay, so any outcome in which you get a payoff bigger than 1-1 is a possibility. It also has to be one that you can get to via this process of following instructions. Okay, so these instructions say play CC half of the time, CD another half of the time. Okay, so you can think of the outcomes that you can get by following instructions. They're just the convex hull of all of the points. Okay, if you kind of randomize, if you play this one half the time and this one half the time, and you get a point here. You play this one 2/3 of the time, this one 1/3 of the time, and you get a point slightly closer. Okay, so by kind of combining things, like combining the different possibilities like that, you play one half the time, another 2/3 of the time, etc., etc. You can get any point in this area. Okay, and then the condition said it has to be above this worst possible payoff. Okay, so it has to be over here somewhere. So what this Folk theorem is saying is that any point in this area can be sustained as an average payoff in this game. Okay, so for a sub-game perfect Nash equilibria in which the average payoff is 1-1, people get 1 every period. For a sub-game perfect Nash equilibria, they'll get you this cooperative outcome, so you get 2-2. But we're sub-game perfect Nash equilibria that get you anywhere in between as well. And we're also sub-game perfect Nash equilibria which will give you kind of asymmetric things, where player 1 ends up getting more than player 2. So these infinitely repeated games generally have lots and lots of strategies, lots and lots of outcomes, equilibria. We're mostly going to be concerned with these maximal profit ones though. You know, if people are going to the trouble of colluding, you think they're probably gonna take the one that gives them the highest profit. Okay, so if you're doing the game theory stuff, I'm sure you'll go into this Folk theorem in more detail. Here I'm just presenting it to show you that there are some other equilibria. You don't need to worry too much about the details. Clearly I scared someone away. Okay, so can we apply the Folk theorem to the games we're interested in? We're interested in Bertrand competition and Cournot competition. Okay, so under Bertrand competition, if everyone else is trying to screw you over, what profits do you end up getting? Yeah, you said you end up forced to price a margin because you make no profits. And same with Cournot competition, what profits do you end up getting? Yeah, it's just the same. So in Cournot competition, if the other guy produces the quantity under perfect competition, then you don't have any choice but to produce nothing at all. Because if you produce anything, you're going to make a loss on it. Okay, so under both Bertrand and Cournot competition, the worst you can end up doing if everyone else is trying to screw you over is getting 0 profits. Okay, so this Folk theorem is saying that any combination of profits between 0 profits and the monopoly level of profits is a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium. Okay, so you know, there are equilibria of these games in which no one makes any profits, and there are equilibria in which people share the monopoly profits, and there's every combination in between. There are asymmetric ones where one guy makes the monopoly profits, another one makes nothing at all, etc., etc. Okay, so it's a bit of a failure of the theory of microeconomics, but the games we're interested in have so many equilibria. Okay, and people come up with all these refinements of equilibria that rule out certain ones for various different reasons, but none of them are completely satisfactory. Okay, so a big problem in microeconomics and game theory in particular is, you know, they predict almost everything for microeconomic models. Almost everything is rationalizable in these models, so it's slightly disappointing. But one nice way of choosing equilibria is choose the one that is Pareto optimal amongst the people playing the game. Okay, and in that case, that's always going to select the maximum profit one. Okay, and this is, I just say this more formally down here. So if you've got, here's profits of firm 1, firm 2 up to firm n. They're all positive, and the sum of all of the profits is less than the monopoly level of profits. Okay, any combination of profits that satisfies that property will be a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium of this game. So one thing that's interesting about this is that in what you'd seen previously to this year, Cournot competition always resulted in higher profits than Bertrand competition. Now there's not really any difference between them. Once you have an infinitely repeated game, in both cases you can get any outcome between perfect competition and monopoly. And kind of a further interesting thing is that under Cournot competition, for normal Cournot competition, firms make positive profits. in this bespoke theorem equilibria, for a sum in which firms make zero profits. Okay, so not only is the infinitely repeated game, so it's kind of, the infinitely repeated game can actually be worse than the equilibrium of the single game. So with infinitely repeated Cournot for equilibrium in which firms make zero profits, which is kind of surprising, perhaps. Okay, so in the last few slides, we're just going to talk a little bit about when you might expect to see collusion. Okay, so we produced this model previously that gave some conditions about when collusion might be more likely. You know, about the probability of firms having these death shocks, the interest rate, etc., etc. People have also done research on what happens over the business cycle with collusion. Okay, so Rotenberg in Salona. Rotenberg is a macroeconomist. You might have, I don't know, in third year macro, you might do Rotenberg price setting. Do you do the origins of Phillips curves in macro? Next term. Okay, so you might see more of this guy next term. So what they do, they have the same structure, repeated Bertrand, but there's stochastic demand. Okay, so rather than demand growing over time continuously, sometimes demand is high, sometimes demand is low, but some shocks to demand. And what they find that in a boom, demand is high, so the profits from deviating are going to be higher. Okay, so you have a bigger short-term gain from setting a price just below the monopoly one if you deviate during a boom because there's higher demand. So in a boom, in order to persuade people not to deviate, you have to kind of promise them more. So what happens is that prices have to be lower in... So it's more tempting to deviate in a boom because demand is higher, so profits are going to be higher, overall profits. So you've got to, if you want to stop people deviating, you've got to make it so that if they do deviate, they don't make so high profits. One way you can reduce the profits of a deviating firm is to reduce the price you charge. Okay, so if you choose a price below the monopoly price, then the incentive to deviate is lower. Okay, in the extreme case in which in a boom you set price as marginal cost, no one would deviate, right? So the lower the price that everyone's setting, the lower the incentives to deviate. Okay, so to remove the incentive to deviate in a boom, you have to set a lower price. So price ends up being lower during booms than it is during recessions. You get high price in recessions, low price in booms. So this is leading to a kind of counter-cyclical markup. So the price divided by marginal cost is going in the opposite direction to the business cycle. In a boom, when demand is high, the markup is low, and vice versa. So a lot of the early macro data said that markups were counter-cyclical. Okay, so this was the stylized fact that these guys were trying to replicate. Markups were counter-cyclical. The recent empirical evidence, though, says the markups are actually pro-cyclical. What was happening was that the guys who were getting these counter-cyclical markups, they were looking at long data series and at very low frequencies. It seems like markups are counter-cyclical, but they seem to be pro-cyclical over the business cycle. And Green and Porter in 1984 showed one way how you can get pro-cyclical markups out of these models. And what they do is they suppose that firms can't observe the state of demand. So firms can't tell if we're in a boom or recession today. All they can see is how many people are coming into their shop. And there are two possibilities. If not many people are coming into their shop, well, one possibility is that there's a recession. Okay, it's bad for everyone. Another possibility is that another firm has cut their price, so everyone's buying from the other firm. And if a firm can't tell between those two hypotheses, then they even if a firm does deviate, they kind of have to assume give them some benefit of the doubt. You know, forgive them eventually, because it could have just been a bad demand shock. Okay, so let me say that again. You know, imagine you're one of these firms, you can't tell what the state of aggregate demand is. You maybe have a hunch that your rival has cut his price, and that's why not many people are coming into your shop. But if you decide to punish him, and you punish him forever, you know, you might be screwing yourself over, because it might just be that with some bad aggregate demand shock, and not many people were coming into your shop because overall demand in the economy was low. Okay, so if you can't tell the difference between your rival cutting its price and overall demand being low, then you kind of have to forgive your rival eventually, because it might, you know, he might have been telling the truth. He might have been being good and setting the price he was supposed to set, and he might just have been aggregate demand just low. Okay, so in the Green and Porter model, what happens is firms don't punish forever. Okay, rather than setting price and marginal cost forever after one of these deviations, they just set it for some short period of time, because they're not sure if it was really a deviation or if demand was just low. And when you make this change to the model, you know, they prove it's an equilibrium, you end up with pro-cyclical markups, not counter-cyclical markups. And Porter, 1983, does a case study of the 19th century US railroad. So I guess it's a railroad up the east coast of the US, and apparently there was exactly this kind of dynamic collusive equilibrium between the different train companies. And again, they found it hard to distinguish between deviations and their rival and aggregate demand. So, you know, there's nice kind of narrative evidence, but this is the story that was going on in that particular case. Excuse me. And there are various other extensions we can make to a model. So rather than thinking about common business cycle shocks, you might think about shocks that only hit one firm rather than another. So a firm's bank going bankrupt, or machine breaking, or new inventions. So previously we had these death shocks which completely killed a firm, but maybe we just have shocks that force a firm to set a lower price for some reason, or a higher price. So maybe there are some fluctuations in marginal cost. Then these shocks again lead a firm to have no alternative but to cut its price. So again, you don't want to punish firms with price and marginal cost forever. If the firm has no choice but to cut its price, then it really can't be optimal to punish them forever for reducing their price. But if these shocks only arrive rarely, then it's going to be easier to sustain a collusive economy. Another way that collusion might end up being easier is if firms are competing in multiple markets at the same time. So, yeah, US airlines, say, they're competing on the route between Dallas and New York, and they're also competing on the route between Boston and New Orleans. Okay, there are lots of airline routes in the US, and maybe if a firm deviates on one route, you want to punish them by cutting your price across all the routes you're serving. Okay, so you can really punish companies, because if a firm just cuts its price a tiny bit in one market, it only gains profit in that one market in which it deviates, you can then punish them on all markets from then on. And the natural answer to that is that, well, firms will just deviate in all markets simultaneously if they want to deviate. But maybe firms have kind of natural advantages in some markets rather than others. So if you think about European airlines, BA is always going to have this natural advantage flying from Heathrow. Lufthansa is always going to have this natural advantage flying from Munich or wherever. Okay, so if firms have some natural advantage in certain markets, their costs are lower in that market, say, or their demand is higher for exogenous reasons, then this kind of punishment across multiple routes can really be painful. You know, when firms have these asymmetric costs, the equilibrium is going to be that BA serves all the flights out of Heathrow, Lufthansa serves all the flights out of Munich. Okay, so BA doesn't worry too much about flying to Germany because they know that Lufthansa. No, sorry, I should say BA doesn't worry about flights between Munich and Düsseldorf. Okay, because they know that that's a Lufthansa natural domain. Okay, so it'd be hard for BA to compete in that area. So BA aren't competing at all on Munich to Düsseldorf. But if Lufthansa come along and Lufthansa start cutting prices on the routes on which they are competing, so Berlin to Heathrow, then BA is going to step in and start flying from Munich to Düsseldorf. Okay, so although BA isn't currently serving the natural routes, the German airlines, for ones internal to Germany, they kind of stand ready to do that if Lufthansa deviate in some way from what they're currently doing. It's kind of, in Europe, there are some regulatory problems with BA flying from Düsseldorf to Munich. So I'm not sure BA would actually be allowed to do that with current European law. But in the US, you get a lot of these regional airlines. You get regional airlines which have a strong base in New York, another one which has a strong base in the Midwest somewhere. Okay, they're all legally allowed to fly on any route, and it's the cost for them to start flying on a new route are really quite low. So this is exactly what you see. You know, airlines fly the routes out of their home hub, but if any airline starts deviating and cutting prices on routes in which there is competition, then airlines move in and start flying out of other hubs as well. You know, airlines are a very interesting industry because it's actually very cheap to start a new airline. No airlines, you know, you might think planes are really expensive, everything's very expensive, but very few airlines own planes. You know, they just rent a plane. You rent a plane, you rent runway space, you know, you rent some crew. There are commercial services that will provide the food for you. So starting a new airline is very easy. So it's an interesting economic problem why there's so little competition in airlines. And you have to look to a story something like that to explain it. You know, if a new airline comes in, they know that they're going to be heavily punished. Okay, so you can think about what happens when Virgin started flying London to New York. You know, I remember a time when you could get a return flight to New York for 100 quid. Immediately after Virgin entered, the prices were just crazy. Okay, and but it's just kind of aggressive punishment against the new entrant to try and encourage them just to leave. Virgin somehow managed to survive that aggressive punishment for a while. They're still in the market. Now prices are back up. BA and American Airlines have just accepted that they're going to have Virgin as part of their collusive agreement from then on. So airlines are a quite interesting case study. This is another funny story. Okay, so you might think that knowledge about the prices in the market is always going to be good for competition. We're talking in the UK at the moment. We have all this crap about the big six energy companies, and it's hard to switch. People don't know what the prices are. So you might think that one way of increasing competition in the energy market would just be to have public news releases in the newspaper that say the price of this energy company is such and such, the price of this energy company is such and such. Well, something similar happened in Denmark. Okay, this was the ready-mixed concrete market, so it's not quite the energy market, but it's a similar story. So, you know, the Danish Competition Commission was worried that there wasn't enough competition in concrete. So they were going to increase transparency of the market by publishing prices of all of the different concrete firms. Okay, so consumers could easily shop around to find the cheapest one. And what happened was that once they started publishing this information, prices actually increased rather than decreased. And rather than having quite a lot of price dispersion, with some firms being cheap, some firms being more expensive, after the government started publishing this information, all the prices rapidly converged to being at the same level. Okay, price dispersion fell. And the natural explanation for this is that publishing all this information made it easier for firms to detect any deviation from the collusive equilibrium. Okay, so once the information was out there in public, if a firm decided to cut its price, all the other firms would know that it had cut its price straight away. Okay, and this would make collusion a lot easier to sustain. So as a result, we're able to end up with a higher price. So actually publishing information can end up increasing prices because it's going to facilitate this collusion to take place. That seems to be everything I had for today. So there are some exercises in our Shine and the online ones as well. And then conclusion, well, again, this was last week really. The Cournot competition is capacity constraint version. And as we move away from efficient rationing, you get lower profits rather than compared to standard Cournot competition. We showed that collusion with a monopoly level of profits is sustainable either with Cournot competition or with competition. And we showed that this spoke theorem means that there are lots of other equilibria as well. And then we were looking at collusion, the times when collusion was more likely because the price was bigger than marginal cost. And this is more likely when we're a few thirds of the industry, where markets are growing, there is less re-entry. When firms are really leaving the market, when real interest rates are low, why do I bother? Or you can read it off the slide. I'm going home. Just off-stone brush.
Also one, something.
Just for the house. Well, it's expensive to pay both here and in London. When I was renting, well, I guess you don't rent prices, don't you? I was paying 1,100 quid a month, which was quite a big choice. So, yeah, it's actually buying is kind of better value than renting. It's just getting a deposit. It's difficult.